My name is Jay Sugarman, and I want to welcome you to Museum Open House. This ongoing series features and highlights many of the outstanding museums and other cultural institutions. The main purpose of most programs is to inform viewers about current and upcoming exhibits, various programs, resources, and other opportunities that are available for the general public. Today, we're exploring the remarkable ways that photographs preserve history, memory, and identity. A single image can capture a fleeting moment, but can also tell stories that resonate across generations. When those photographs are collected, preserved, and shared, they become an invaluable record of people, cultures, and communities whose experiences might otherwise be forgotten. Our guests today are helping ensure that those stories endure. Joining us is Dr. Arto Vaun, Executive Director of Project SAVE, the world's largest photographic archive dedicated to preserving the Armenian experience. For more than 5 decades, Project SAVE has safeguarded an extraordinary collection of photographs and artifacts, connecting people with their heritage while creating a lasting resource for future generations. We're also pleased to welcome acclaimed photographer Winslow Martin, whose exhibition My Armenia chronicles his deeply personal journeys through Armenia during a pivotal period in the nation's modern history. Through his powerful documentary photographs, Winslow invites us to experience everyday life, resilience, tradition, and transformation through the eyes of someone who developed a profound connection with the country and its people. During our conversation, we'll learn about Project SAVE's important mission, discover how photography can preserve both personal and collective memory, and take a closer look at the stories behind the compelling images featured in My Armenia. We'll also explore how exhibitions like that one can help visitors connect with history, not simply through facts and dates, but through faces, places, and moments that make history come alive. Let's start by meeting Arto and Winslow. Welcome. So delighted you're both able to be here.
Thank you
Thank
so
you so
much for
much, Jay.
having us.
Eager to find out much more about Project Save and My Armenia and have you inform viewers. To that end, Arto, for viewers who may not have discovered Project Save yet, what is some of the history behind the organization, its mission, and why was it founded more than 50 years ago?
Well, thank you so much, Jay, for having us. It's very much appreciated, and for the lovely introduction. Project Save has been, as you say, around for more than 50 years. Um, our founder, Ruth Tomasian, is originally from this area, from Belmont, Massachusetts.
Hmm.
And it's a very interesting story. Ruth is half Armenian. Her Armenian side goes back to the 19th century, so it's a very old Armenian American side of the family. The non-Armenian side literally came on like the Mayflower. It's a quite kind of a quintessential American kind of backstory that she has. From a very young age, she was obsessed with photography. And in the 1960s, um, as uh, uh, people know, that was a time in the United States where there were a lot of young Americans thinking about what it means to be American. That was around the time when the whole kind of topic of, ethnic American, right? So what does it mean to be Italian American? What does it mean to be Greek American and so forth? And you had the civil rights movement and so many things were happening at that time. So Ruth found herself starting to think about that a little bit. And while she was living in New York City, she was working on Broadway in kind of costume design and hat making and so forth. And long story short, at that time, there was still a very vibrant old Armenian community in Manhattan. And a lot of those folks were survivors of the Armenian genocide. And they found out that there was this young woman working on Broadway who's Armenian American. and they got in touch with her to help them put on some plays at
Mm.
the churches in Manhattan. So while Ruth was helping them do that in terms of costume design, she was curious what Armenian fashion was like in the Ottoman Empire,
Mm.
and so she started thinking about photographs. Are there photographs of the turn of the century or late 1800s? Um, and then next thing you know, she discovered through these connections with these Armenian folks in Manhattan, who many of whom I think really took to her because they saw how excited she was to hear their stories. And I think, as I say, a lot of them were genocide survivors. It could be that a lot of them were maybe a little bit isolated. And so they really I think became this relationship kind of blossomed between Ruth and these older folks. And when she saw some of the photographs they had that they started sharing with her, it was an epiphany, and she was off and running. So that love of photography then found this heritage. And she really had a kind of like Saul falling off the horse in Damascus moment. And then cut to 1975, she realizes, oh my God, all right, I now I have hundreds, maybe into the thousands of photographs. This is going to be my life's work. She leaves Broadway. She creates Project Save Photograph Archive as a 501c nonprofit. And then a few years later, she moves back to Boston to get really officially get to work. So, what started as one person's obsession in the 1960s now is the world's largest such archive. These are all original photographs that date back to oldest one dating back to around 1861 from around the world. And at this point, we have over 150,000 original photographs in the collection. So I think, the mission has always been that, and you so eloquently put it in your introduction, that these photographs, each photograph is telling a story beyond a date and a place and a fact, as you say. It's telling a tremendous story, both in terms of the subject. A lot of times it's telling a story in terms of the photographer who took the photo.
Mm.
We now find ourselves in a place where I think Ruth was way ahead of her time, as I think a lot of cultural workers were back in the 60s and 70s. I think she was way ahead of her time. She picked a medium, which this is very unusual. She picked a medium first that she was obsessed with her whole life, and then she connected it to a cultural heritage. So for us to this day, it's about championing photography. And in doing so, it's about both the specificity of the extraordinary story of the global Armenian experience, as well as the universal story of what photographs on a visceral level tell us about being human.
Yeah, well put, well put. Why did you choose My Armenia as the inaugural exhibition for Project Slave's newly expanded gallery?
Well, with My Armenia, it was very fortuitous because we moved, Project Save was run out of Ruth's home for many years, to the point where it literally just, she was like sleeping in a little corner, and it was just the archive. And obviously that was not sustainable. And then we moved to a space that we had for, I don't know, something like 28 years, but it wasn't a public facing space. In other words, we didn't have a gallery and more workspace and so forth. So about in 2020, but like not that long ago, really. It seems like long ago, but around 2023, we moved to this current location at 600 Pleasant Street, where we had a gallery, we have proper workspaces, conference room, meeting room, all that. But then a few months ago, I was fortunate enough, had the opportunity to take over the whole first floor of this building. So we doubled our footprint. That other side, we converted into a contemporary photography gallery. There's also a workspace, there's other spaces behind it, but the main gallery, the purpose of it is that now we truly have a committed contemporary gallery space. And so now we are set apart not only as such a unique archive in and of itself. But now, it's very rare to be this kind of an archive, but also have a committed space where you are
Mm.
showcasing contemporary photography.
Mhm.
And I had met Winslow years ago. I was living overseas for a long time, around 13 years, and seven of those years were in Armenia. And around maybe 2015, 2016, I just happened to meet Winslow. And I, I didn't had no idea I was eventually going to be the executive director of Project Save and back in
Mm.
Boston and so forth. But Winslow really stuck with me, both not just because he's just a good person. We just really clicked, and I just really enjoyed meeting him. And we're both from Boston and so forth. But also, I saw a few of his images, and they just burned right into my brain. So
Mm.
when I joined Project Save and Winslow and I reconnected, I had told him whatever, maybe 4 years ago or whatever it was, 5 years ago, maybe when I first joined Project Save, that I said, at some point, I really want to exhibit your work. So when we were able to have this expanded, beautiful gallery, it only made sense that I think Winslow's the work itself. It's so lyrical. I think it's so beautiful. It's so from the heart. And I think Winslow's own story of his connection to Armenia, not being Armenian, and someone who's given so much to the country and to that heritage. I just thought it was perfect, and we were so taken aback. Really, we thought that it would go well at the opening, but we throughout the night we had around 200 people that were.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, we were really blown away, and so it's been really lovely.
Before we hear from Winslow, we're fortunate to have a clip of the exhibition area, the expanded galleries. And as we roll it in, Arto, would you just
Sure,
give a few words about the layout of the exhibition
sure,
and the expanded galleries, please?
sure, sure, sure. So, what you're seeing here, this whole space used to be actually a kitchen cabinet outlet, or it was where the contractors they would show. These were all like kitchen models and so forth. So this was a lot of work. I'm so happy with how it came out. So what I love about this space is that when you walk in, it's very airy. There's a lot of room to really let photographs come to life. Um, and there are these kind of pockets where, when you're putting on an exhibition, as we did with this one, there are kind of some lovely, like, for example, this space here, where it can be curated in a way that a story
Mm.
is kind of being told. And then when you turn the corner, it really opens up to a nice big space where we can have not just for the photographs, but for artist talks, for music. We're planning a lot of activity in that space. So it just worked out very well. And I think with Winslow's exhibit, it was curated by Numbar Alexanyan, who's a wonderful photographer. He's up in the North Shore. Um, I think it just really it allows the stories of these photographs one at a time, and the kind of on the one hand, there's a kind of melancholy quality, but melancholy implies also beauty. And there's a certain poetry and as I say, like a big-heartedness to Winslow's work that really sticks with me. And I think the space kind of allows that to breathe and lets people, really engage.
Yeah, wonderful layout. Thank you. Winslow, welcome. I know your journey to Armenia began, I think, almost unexpectedly in 1999. Looking back, what were some of your first impressions when you arrived in Armenia for the first time?
Well, I was there to continue, really almost conclude a story I was doing for local community newspapers on a remarkable priest who I didn't know was remarkable until I started photographing him, Father Dajah Davidian from St. James in Watertown, and I was doing stories on caregiving and decided to photograph a priest, and the fact that he was Armenian had no particular bearing to me. The longer I spent with this charismatic kind of faith in action guy was being captivated by the Armenian community in Watertown. So he invited me to Armenia for 10 days. It was a quick trip. And I guess the biggest impression I left with were a couple things. It was a short visit. The post-Soviet look, realities really were amazing to me. The clear struggles and poverty, you could almost say, um, and the unbelievable cultural beauty of so many things there. And maybe my first impression was focused on the churches because I went there with Father Davidian. I had been raised a lot of my youth in Europe, so I'd seen a lot of sort of famous and not famous cultural sites. And I was like, this is on that level. And it amazed
Oh.
me. And the spirituality that comes through going to these churches is really powerful. But the largest thing that really stayed with me and in some ways drew me back was the warmth of the people. Yes, I was an outsider, so maybe the welcoming was a little different, but it is a major part of their culture and tradition. They have the phrase in Armenian, "Mink spasa mink zes." It means we wait for your return. And it's not like ciao or see you later. It is literally meant as an obligation to return. And that it's a strong pull because what you're returning to is sort of the lore of warmth, of food, of community, and of respect and shared curiosity. And as a photographer, that was amazing to me.
Building on that last comment, how do you approach photographing people respectively?
Well, it's ironic because I photograph less on the street and more inside, either domestic or inside people's lives. So you would, there's no sneaking around. There's no trying to get, photograph when people don't want it. So really the only way you become invisible is to be so comfortable and
Hmm.
known and part of that world that they ignore the camera. It's true. My mind is bifurcated, but it's actually more parts. I'm literally interacting, talking, doing things, eating, but at the same time, my brain is seeing light, moments, and big picture, it's intuitive because in some ways I may in the moment feel like I don't know what I'm doing, meaning I don't know the results, but I am an observer who an eyewitness and I'm photographing with complete permission.
Mhm, mhm. Well,
I disappear to them as a photographer and become a human being that they're interested in.
Well, that's quite skillful to do, but I think it goes so well with what you said earlier with the welcoming aspect of the people that it's a wonderful blend of your approach and their uh, willingness to have strangers, individuals be part of their lives. We're fortunate to have a selection from the exhibition. So we're going to bring it up to enjoy. And as we do, appreciate if you share some commentary of what we're seeing um, as we come to this one, which we saw in the initial poster earlier. Please, a little background of this
Sure.
wonderful piece.
So when I talk about the work, there's so many angles I could take. The thing I'm most left with is the experience of being there. Then there's the aesthetic parts of the picture and what it might mean. I kind of leave that to others, but so to talk about this picture, this is taken at a place called Horvirap, which is a very historical site. There's a long story to it, as there always is in Armenia, on the now border of Turkey. What you see most dominantly is
Hmm.
Mount Ararat. There are two mountains, and Mount Ararat, you can say, is the holy mountain, the Mount Fuji, you might say, of Armenia.
Yeah, yeah.
Historically, that's where Noah's Ark landed. And it's burned into the heart and soul of every Armenian. And an irony is it's actually over the border with Turkey. Again, a long story. But I was visiting Horvirap there early in my visits with Father Davidian just sort of to see, but I'm always photographing. And so this image is Horvirap with basically a tourist with an umbrella to ward off the heat. And that happens to be Father Davidian's picture. He was probably talking as usual, and gesturing. As far as it coming together as a photograph, you could say a lot about it, but because it contains the element of pointing towards Ararat, pointing upwards heavenly, you could say, and the mountain itself with something like maybe a melancholy moment with the woman all coming together. I think it could speak in many ways to people that either know or don't know about the context.
Wonderful, wonderful. Let's continue our behind the scenes tour with this one here, please.
So this has become sort of my branding iconic image, and photography is funny. You never know the results. So about what I was saying about being comfortable in situations, the easiest way for that to happen is to go with people that are known by those that you end up being around. So this is a woman I came to know through Father Davidian, Naira, and she was really in with me. She loved to take me around Armenia. And she said, I know there's this sort of national concert, dance, singing, music at this place, and let's go. And you can photograph them rehearsing, which was what this was. And again, a very long story about this specifically, but there was also tightrope walking, which is a
Wow.
traditional Armenian traveling art that goes back to before the Middle Ages and is really sort of faded. But this kid was just practicing. And I'm taking a lot of photographs. If you look at my contact sheets, I have him in different gestures. It happened to be, without knowing it till later, that there was a moment where he's literally on one toe as if he's jumping, he's not on the rope, balancing against a tableau in the theater of Mount Ararat. So I didn't see it till later, and it was one of those like, oh my God, there's a moment. It works. And again, I'll leave it to others to say, but you could say in some ways it represents Armenia, a young person balancing beautifully on a rope, very tenuous, very perilous with Mount Ararat, and this yin yang of peril yet beauty, I think really summarizes Armenia. And just one more thing, the white flag at the end has a historical note, but I was showing this to some priest who I met, and he said that to me is like the Holy Spirit. So as I like to say, whether that's there or not, it is for him, so it's there.
Wow, what an image. How skillful to be able to capture that. And your commentary just makes it come to life. Well, we want to take advantage of our remaining time and look at a couple more. A few words about this shot,
This
please.
is just so simple. Again, to talk about the context. This is Nair on the right, my friend. I formed a very personal relationship with the village where her mother's sister is from, Chikalovka on Sevan. I've stayed the night. I've been there many times. And they were going out to fields every day to farm, and she came with me. And again, make of it what you want. It's just sort of a magical moment that you could read flirtation, you could just read friendliness, you could read whatever you like about it. But I guess one could also say the composition falls together. And when composition falls together, it just engages the viewer longer. And maybe you can look at it again and again. And so it has visual impact. And I am always happy about that.
Now, when you say again and again, I've looked at these several times already, but having you provide some commentary and insight just allows me to pick up additional things that I missed, even with half a dozen viewings already. This one, please.
So this one is in Artsakh, known by many as Nagorno-Karabakh. It's a long, long story. It's a source now of ethnic cleansing and war, and I won't get into that so much because we don't have the time, but I was lucky enough to go there with an inside access and went to this very remote village on the border with Azerbaijan. It was literally like walking into the Middle Ages. I was staying with, again, the sister of somebody who I met in Nagorno-Karabakh, and that boy is the grandson of that sister staying at her house. And this was just a neighbor came and talked. And I guess I don't usually do this, but I'll say very simply put, you could say it's a picture that again is engaging of that conversation, but somehow it conjures youth and age, you could say. Maybe that old man is looking at his younger self. And this is at a place called the Khachkar Forest. These are traditional Armenian graves, strangely remind us kind of a Celtic art, intricate, beautiful, timeless. And these two people I was with were just walking away. So again, it's a simple moment, but it lasts, I think, because of meaning you can read into it. And that's where composition, light, and all those things which work through me intuitively can come together, thankfully.
Stunning, stunning. You know, when visitors leave My Armenia, Winslow, what feeling or insight do you hope stays with them long after they've left the gallery?
It's a good question. I mean, I have my personal story where this is my early work, and I'm glad it's cohesive. What do I wish? I guess in some ways, simple things from non-Armenians, a curiosity about Armenia, a willingness to eat Armenian food, follow the news, look up, talk to their friends about it, know about current events. So that's kind of on a simple level. I guess I hope that somehow the photographs artistically sear into their minds and they have an emotional relationship with it and that it stays with them. Maybe that's kind of like artist's ultimate ambition. And as far as putting context and kind of a meaning on that, I'm a little hesitant to do that, but I would say humanism, a humanitarian feeling of openness and respect, and to know life is complicated, and that in some ways, Armenia is no different than anywhere. It's a beautiful country with individuals living varied lives, trying to get along and make it day to day. To summarize, I'd say taking an interest in Armenia is my simple aim, but other people that are more art critics and stuff might see a lot more in it that's sort of artistic. And I don't know that we have time, but I have a very large archive and preserving stories and memories for that humanistic end is where Arto and I are on the same page. And it took me a long time to see that photographs don't need to be seen immediately, but are like wine and they can age with time in a nice way.
Nicely put, nicely put.
Yeah.
In less than a minute we have left, Arto. Just quick comment on how long the exhibition will be in view. And I know it's going to be very short, lots to say, but your vision for Project Save in the upcoming years.
Sure. Well, so we were because of the wonderful response we had, we extended Winslow's exhibit till August 29th. The visiting hours are at projectsave.org. We're launching a music series called Archive After Hours. The first one, actually, Winslow doesn't know this because we're just announcing it today, but the first one will be August 15th, which is a Saturday, which will be a good opportunity. I thought, why don't we just do it while we have these beautiful photographs
Mm,
up? And that will be kind of an intimate music series, a little kind of like almost like singer-songwriter ambient type thing.
nice.
But the bigger picture, yeah, this has been quite a watershed year for us. One of the things we're doing is an initiative called Project Save Armenia, where I've felt that now that Project Save has this incredible track record. We're going to be going to Armenia once a year to do both photography workshops and archival related
Oh,
workshops and talks.
fantastic.
Yeah, and this year the inaugural workshop will be led by Winslow and with Kevro Kemirzian, who's another incredible photographer and I and also on the board of Project Save, as Winslow is, by the way. And so we're looking forward to that in October. There's information about that on the site. And then this whole year coming up, we have an exhibition of Armenian Americans. This will be our first big exhibit of our archival photographs
Nice.
in honor of the 250th. Um,
Arto, unfortunately, have to stop there
all
because
good.
we've run out of time. I know we
Go
could go
for it.
on and on about Project Save and definitely Winslow's work, but all the more to encourage viewers to make their way to Project Save in the next coming weeks and well beyond. But just want to close by thanking you both again for taking the time to be here and wish
Thank
you
you.
both continued success with future endeavors.
Thanks
Thanks,
so much, Jay.
Jay. It was wonderful.
I also want to thank those of you watching for joining us and hope you'll be able to tune in next time.